Hello again. My name is Ian Currey and this is Thinking Out Loud. If you enjoyed this and other videos on this channel, go ahead and click those like and subscribe buttons. It's free and I'm told that will give the videos a better chance of being seen. Passing the links on to your friends helps too. Recently, Hillary and I managed to disappear for a couple of days visiting Windsor. Despite being the middle of winter, there's always a lot to see and do, including, of course, take a few pictures after dark. One of the things I found curious was how so much of what goes on there is taken for granted and accepted as the right way to do things. Come on, let me tell you what I think. By now, you'll probably know I enjoy looking at railways and the infrastructure that goes with them. Much of my childhood was spent within easy reach of railways, and I'd often spend hours watching trains go by. My earliest memories involved steam trains and the smells and the soot they produced. Lovely. Also during my childhood, many miles of the national rail routes were replaced by motorways and hundreds of stations closed. Now, one of the fun things going on these days is that some of those same stations are opening back up, and once again trains are running to remote destinations. That rail renewal is not fast enough for me, but nonetheless seems to be happening one slow mile at a time. Windsor has two railway stations. One sends trains directly to Waterloo, taking a southerly route through Clapham Junction, while the former main or central station runs trains to Paddington. One of the interesting things I noticed is that the central station has a lovely old canopy that once covered the many steam trains that would have used the station. And it's got an obvious station feel to the whole place. Over the years, many lovely tea shops and restaurants have popped up where the platforms once were. I think the idea was to make the station a destination rather than somewhere you would pass through on your way to somewhere else. Well, that's great, but, well, when you want to get to the new destination shopping and eating places, you still may very well want to travel there by train. And trains have been relegated to the far end of the area, and just one short platform now exists to cater for the shuttle service that trundles back and forth to the main line, which is a few miles away. The trains are usually packed. People have to stand because there aren't any seats available. And since there is only one track in and out, and shops now occupy space useful for trains, there's no option to add either more trains or longer trains. Oops. If you add the brand new Elizabeth line trains that serve the next station down the line, and that makes access to Paddington and central London even faster and easier than ever before, you start to see that the destinization of the station may not have been such a great idea after all. The station was designed well for one thing and adapted for another because, well, we don't need trains anymore. Only now we do. And now it finds a resurgence in rail passengers and can't handle the crowds. What a way to run a railway. The station is right next to the famous castle. And if you're going to visit Windsor and the castle, the train, despite being crowded, is very convenient. One cold morning, Hillary and I watched the parade for the changing of the guard. Now, for those of you interested in seeing a changing of the guard, it's much easier to see at Windsor than at Buckingham Palace, and the ceremony is very similar, other than there's only one marching band and not two. Since this was the middle of winter and an exceptionally cold day, few tourists were around to observe the traditional ceremony. Now, as I watched the procession of the new guard arriving through the streets of the town, I wondered, despite the very few onlookers, well, at least that day, how many millions of people would have seen this same ceremony. Quite a few, I decided. But then I got to thinking, this was a castle that had been there for over 1,000 years. Why were the guard coming to it from a barracks built in my lifetime? Surely, in olden times, there wouldn't have been such a parade, would there? Wouldn't the soldiers guarding the castle and those living inside have been in there with them? Why the half-mile parade in the cold? Tourism, perhaps? Once the guard had changed, out came the Irish Guard pipe band, now leading the old guard back to their barracks down the hill at the bottom of the high street. These days, the real guards of the guards are outside the castle with big guns. So much for the myth of British police not being armed. In both cases of the station and the castle, the design use has changed over the years. No longer is accommodation provided inside the castle for the guards, and no longer does the station provide place for sufficient trains. Lovely as the new arrangements are, traditions and history simply don't back up the reality of the past. Far from being a place tourists come to see, Windsor Castle is still a royal residence. Is that residence diminished in any way by modern changes and lack of space for people guarding it? Probably not. Space for the very thing they were intended for has changed over time. The importance of other things, you could say, has crowded out the main thing. With the station, the obvious main thing was once to move passengers to and from the town in as much comfort and with as much ease as possible. Crowded cafes were not on the designer's list of things to include when the station was built over 150 years ago. As for the castle, well, that repurposing is far more complex, isn't it? These days, it's hardly likely that such a structure would ever be needed to protect the royal family from invading parliamentarians in a less than civil war. Looking at the modern representations of the ceremonial guard changing, I wondered how people around the castle, in the strange crooked houses that are still standing, would have seen the castle. Imposing, I'm sure, and probably very mysterious. Was the king in residence? What was he like? Were the rooms inside really as opulent as rumour had decided that they were? These days, access to the castle is easy enough. You get a ticket, in you go. The tour gives all sorts of access and background to the more than 1,000-year-old tradition and the history that oozes out of the world's biggest continuously occupied castle. As the old guard leaves, I want you to notice one older man wandering out through the same gate that the guards have just marched through. Access granted. Just as with the king's castle, with God, the same sentiment is available. We can boldly enter heaven's most holy place because of the blood of Jesus. By his death, Jesus opened a new life-giving way through the curtain into the most holy place. Access granted. One of these days you too will have to visit Windsor, if for no other reason than to enjoy afternoon tea in one of my favourite places to do such things. That is, unless trains once again occupy the space. Until next time, goodbye.